So at this point, I would like to welcome Megrette and turn the program over to her.
Thank you so much, Stephen. Welcome, everybody. And we really appreciate everyone joining the Center for Mindful Eating. So to begin the program, Stephen has already gone over the learning objectives, but let's make those clear. And again, I have no conflicts of interest to report at this time. So we've already talked about these examples of when judgment might be appropriate and how shame is related to judgment. We're definitely going to list the reasons why shame inhibits change and benefits of mindfulness. We're also going to talk really a lot about this neuroplasticity in the brain and also review some research from eating behaviors as well as participate in a brief meditation. So when does judgment work and when does judgment not work? I guess that really is the question. And when we think about this webinar kind of going forward, really what we're trying to do is we're not actually focusing in on you, the healthcare provider, counselor. We are making a general assumption that you are including a non-judgment stance in your work. This webinar is really talking about how do we get our clients to start assuming that non-judgmental stance. So as you start listening to this again, we're trying to identify tips and ideas to help your clients generate this non-judgmental stance to let go of food labels. So we really want to be very clear when we work with our clients and really, educate them when does judgment work and when does it not work. So judgment is best used when evaluating tangible things. So these might be things like labs, objects, and data. And so these are, I think always a lot of times I always think about these as tools. They're measuring devices. They help us evaluate things. And, again, we have a lot of data in our lives. I think technology really has increased the amount of data that we have. And as a result of that, we might have feelings about the data, which is different. But really what we want to do is we want to help our clients understand that the tangible objects, those are what we're going to spend some time using judgment or discernment. But things that aren't effective for judgment and things that are very ineffective include things like behaviors. It's really hard to judge a behavior. People, feelings, likes, dislikes, hopes, dreams, memories, and preferences. And you can turn around and say, when we're talking about food and eating, that's a lot. And there's a lot of things about food and eating that fall in this category. And the reason why we are really trying to help our clients understand why judgment around these things doesn't really work is because subjective information is dynamic and it's influenced by many variables and it's often associated with a person's self-view. So this is really trying to get into, if we get into the judgment piece, if we start judging these subjective information, we're really going to find that people see that judgment as a view of them. They feel judged versus the data or the information is being judged. So this one concept of just the subjective, objective data, just clarifying that, I wanted to pause and just take some questions. If anyone has any questions, Stephen is going to unmute you, and so you'll be able to actually talk. But right now everyone is muted. Now how you do that on your dashboard, there should be a little hand. You should be able to raise your hand and Stephen can unmute you. This is early in the talk, so you may not have any questions. This may be pretty clear already.
Okay, so actually we have two ways you can ask a question. First off, as Megrette indicated, you could click the little hand button in your in your taskbar, and I would unmute you and you can ask the question in person. Or if you'd just like to type the question into your question box, at that point I will read the question for Megrette to answer. I'm not seeing anybody so far.
Okay, so why don't we go right into our poll, Stephen, if we can.
All right.
So here's our poll.
And hold on a second. All right, so the first poll should be active.
Awesome, great. And the poll reads, kind of how often do clients come to a session with eating food or body shame? And we're getting our results. They're still tabulating. It looks like we have just about 70%. People are still voting. Appreciate that, everybody. So right now, with about 70 to 75% of the people speaking, really what we're seeing is about 25% say always, 70% is saying often, and 5% said sometimes. Almost no one said never. This never happens. So right away, we're going to start kind of getting to the heart of this talk, which is really dealing with this issue. I think we can close the poll, maybe.
Yes, I've closed the poll.
Okay. So, excuse me, I just have to, my mouse is frozen. So, there we go. So, hopefully that's going good. So, shame, what exactly is shame? And this is one of the things that I'd like to spend a little bit of time with. So, defining shame, I'm using the definition from Brené Brown. And she said, shame is defined as an intensely painful feeling or experience that we are flawed and therefore unworthy of connection or belonging. And this is something that I think is really powerful because we talk about it as intensely painful experience and therefore unworthy of connection and belonging. So with 71% of our polls, people in this webinar saying, people are experiencing an intensely painful experience that they are flawed and unworthy of connection and belonging. That's really powerful, and that's going to give you some really good information. And 25% of you said this always happens. So 75% said it sometimes happens, and 25% of you said it always happens. The thing I think is so interesting about shame is it is linked with, shame is pathologic. So it has a pathogenic, not pathologic, it has a pathogenic process to it that's really linked to two key things. So I want to really read these and explore these at a greater degree. The first is the client's degree of self-directed hostility and contempt and self-loathing is related to the amount of shame that a client experiences. And shame is also directly linked with the inability to generate feelings of self-directed warmth, soothing, and reassurance. And that's from Gilbert. So right away, something really interesting has happened. So we're starting to kind of get to this heart of, all right, if my client is experiencing judging or judging themselves, it could lead to shame. What is shame? This intensely painful experience or feeling. I'm flawed and unworthy. And what that leads to is a higher degree of self-directed hostility, contempt, and self-loathing, and a decreased ability to generate self-directed from within me feelings of warmth, soothing, and reassurance. Wow. I mean, when I think about that, I go, ooh, that's big. So whether the shame is self-inflicted or a byproduct of counseling, it really creates motive for clients to seek other coping tools, including food, as a way to self-soothe. Really, I don't know if anyone's ever heard the term, but I talked myself off the cliff. I talked myself off the edge. That's where we get ourselves upset and we can kind of internally talk ourselves down and say, it's okay, Megrette, you know, it's one moment, it's not that big a deal, you know, don't worry, you're good. That's the skill set that's missing. That ability to talk ourselves off of this cliff, that's the skill set that's missing when a client experiences judgment that leads to the feeling of shame. So this is big stuff. I want to pause right now, and I really want to take some questions if that's possible. And again, I know that where many of you might already understand how to do this. So if Stephen,
okay.
if there's any questions, let me know.
So again, if you wish to raise your hand, I'd be happy to recognize you for a live question. We do have one that was typed in already from Gina.
Perfect.
She asks, if clients have grown with judgment all their lives, how can we stop it?
You know, Gina, that's a great question, and I'm not 100% sure we can stop it. What we can do is we can not add to that. We can bring awareness to that behavior. We might be able to have them identify if it's important for them to learn other skills to change that behavior. And that might be a therapy situation. So they might turn around and say, you know what, I was taught I'm an overachiever at self-judgment. Maybe I need therapy. And those are all really good opportunities for coaches and dietitians to turn around and say, this may not be my focus, my personal, professional boundaries, but I could recognize this and lead them to other services. There are situations where what I can say is, don't do any harm. So don't add to or contribute to the situation. You may not be able to resolve it. We don't have to add or contribute. So that would be my place. Is there another question?
Yes, I see Barbara has her hand up, so I'm going to unmute her. Barbara, you're ready to ask a question.
Thanks so much. Barbara, welcome.
You there, Barbara? All right, I'm going to remute Barbara. And let's see.
Hello?
Oh,
Hello?
there she is.
I'm sorry.
Oh,
my question, I finally found what to do. My question was, would you include body weight under your list of tangible items for judgments?
Again, that I think is going to be a personal decision on your part. So to me, weight is very, that to me is a judgmental thing. I think it's really loaded. I work in a diabetes clinic and I have to weigh my clients. And the option that I have for them is to decline. So I have to state in my note that they declined being weighed. I do blind weighing, so I'm the only one who sees it. They don't see it. And I ask them to indicate to me if this would be something that might evoke judgment or shame. And almost universally, people are able to say, you know, I'm okay or I'm not okay with that, please stop. I will tell you, though, I weigh my patients at the end of the session. I don't weigh it at the beginning in order to establish a counseling rapport.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Barbara, for that question. Let me see now. Who else do we have with their hand up? I see Rita has her hand up. Rita, I have unmuted you. If you would like to ask Megrette a question, why don't you go ahead, please? You there, Rita?
Hi, Rita.
Okay. Perhaps Rita is not currently ready to go. I do have a question that was typed into the question box from Julie. She asks, can you provide an example of two of shame in a counseling session?
Oh, gosh, I wish Barbara was still with me. We could have done that out together. So what would be a shaming comment? I think that's what they're asking for. So how would that be defined? So shame by Brené Brown, how she says it is the difference between shame and guilt is I did something that I did an act, or I engage in a behavior that I feel bad about, so I'm sorry that I did it. I feel guilty about doing this unhelpful behavior. Shame is I did this behavior and I'm a bad person. So it isn't that the behavior is unhelpful, it's I'm a bad person, I'm unworthy, I don't deserve this. I'm a bad person. It's very, very self-directed. It's not behavior-directed. It's self-directed. So I work in a diabetes clinic, and pretty much I would say universally on my first or second appointment, my clients walk in and say, I've been really bad. I'm a really bad diabetic. That would be, to me, an indication of shame. So they feel they are bad. Not, oh, I ate a lot of carbohydrates and I bet my blood sugars are high. Their blood sugars are high. It's separate from them. What we hear is that I'm a really bad person. So it's kind of a little bit different. Stephen, I'm not sure if you're aware, but your mic is on and we can hear you breathing. So that just an awareness there. So that's a distinction that might help you. I have a lot of people say things like, oh, I've been really bad. I've really just, I don't care anymore and I'm just really bad. My diabetes is out of control and I'm really bad. So it's the I'm really bad. That's the part that we keep hearing. That's the shame piece. I also hear a lot about weight and A1Cs, how they identify those particular things as they're a bad diabetic, their A1C is up, they're bad, they're not worthy. So that kind of shame process is how I hear it manifest itself. Weight gain will often trigger that same feeling of shame. So I think we got a couple of really good questions, Stephen, so I'm going to keep going and really kind of get to this issue of how mindfulness and how that really can help our clients, how we can use mindfulness to coach our clients more towards this non-judgmental status. So the first thing is that what is mindfulness? This is a very complex definition. So it's paying attention in a particular way on purpose in the present moment non-judgmentally. I think it's a run-on probably. But that really comes from us from a lot of different sources. John Kabat-Zinn is really the one who we attribute this to the most. And this paying attention in a particular way, so whether it may be I'm watching my breath or I'm noticing my thoughts or I'm cultivating positivity, we're directing our attentions in a specific way. We're doing it on purpose, meaning I choose to direct my attention, and we are focusing in a present moment status. The phrasing that I use is I'm trying to become aware of my direct experience or my sensory experience, and I'm doing it non-judgmentally. Whatever arises is okay. I'm just trying to become aware. So awareness really is the only goal. Now, if any of you had a chance to participate in Mindful Eating Day, many of the presentations and the interviews that happened really kind of talked about how we really want to be with our experience and to recognize not all experiences are rainbows and butterflies. Not all experiences, the present moment isn't always pleasant. And that's the way that I like to describe it. The present moment isn't always pleasant. And so really what we're getting at this point, and this is a little tool that I find very helpful for my clients, and I find it very helpful for myself, is that was the experience pleasant, neutral, or unpleasant? I'm not judging it. I'm just trying to identify. I'm trying to create, and this is from Dan Siegel's work. He's a neuropsychiatrist. He talks about creating a coherent narrative. Our brain is hardwired to create a coherent narrative. We are always telling stories. And we're trying to understand if we like the story, if we're not sure about the story, we're kind of neutral, or we don't like the story. So if I have an experience, was it a pleasant experience? Was it neutral? I don't really have any feelings. Was it unpleasant? So this kind of helping clients understand what is the story they're telling. For those of you who know Molly Kellogg and know the wonderful work that she's doing, Molly is a dietitian and a psychotherapist. She refers to this concept as unpacking. So helping a client unpack their experience, this is really what we're driving at right now. Was it pleasant, neutral, or unpleasant? Now, when we do this, it's not a judgment. We're just trying to understand our direct experience, and you can infer from this, do people want to keep having this experience again? Do they want to modify the experience, or do they not want to have the experience again? And again, the role of mindfulness includes the benefits of this kind of non-judgmental stance, this whole mindfulness piece. They help the counselor in their professional life. And this is information from Davis and Hayes. They identified a number of benefits, and this was when we engage in mindfulness. So the first one was, and this again is for the counselor, it includes improvement in emotional regulation, decreased reactivity, increased response flexibility, interpersonal, and intrapersonal. And I misspoke. This is actually for the client. So these are the benefits for the client. And these benefits keep going. So this is for the counselor. And so when the counselor also gets some benefits, and these are the ones that the counselor will get as well. And the first one is empathy. And for those of you who understand both Dr. Brene Brown's work and other neuropsychologists, we're really understanding that empathy is what is therapeutic in a counseling relationship. That experience of empathy, or the sense of feeling heard, is what we believe to be therapeutic in these relationships. So you will experience a sense of empathy, compassion, decreased sense of stress, and less anxiety. And to a lesser degree, both the counselor and the client will experience self-efficacy, patience, intentionality, gratitude, and body awareness. Now, one of the things that we talk about when we talk about mindfulness is that a foundational practice is the non-judgmental counseling stance. And this skill creates an environment where the client can safely express thoughts and feelings that may be emotionally charged. So a lot of times what happens is when we create this counseling stance of non-judgment, clients emote. And I refer to this as the Kleenex emergency. And people joke in my office about the Kleenex emergency because I have Kleenex and I have backup Kleenex and I have more backup Kleenex in my office, because so many times when a client comes into my session, they feel that sense, they feel heard, and all of a sudden years of this judgment around diabetes just kind of bubbles up to the surface. And it's really a lot. There's a lot of processing going on. And when I was a new dietitian, I didn't understand what was going on. I got a lot of support and really tried to understand, why do people cry in my office all the time? And it's been a long process for me to be really comfortable with the crying, and I recognize not everybody is, and that's okay. As you create this non-judgmental counseling stance, as you create a very safe environment, you may find this happening more and more. And a lot of dietitians and a lot of coaches will come back to me and they'll say, I didn't, they were crying so much at the session, I didn't really get the education piece done. What do I do? And I think at this point, I can only share what I've done, which is to recognize it's a very common phenomenon. So I would say 9 out of 10 of all of my clients cry. Doesn't matter if it's the first visit or it's the 10th visit. There's a lot of emotional discharge. Mostly I get tears, sadness. Sometimes I get frustration. So sometimes I get frustration and anger. A lot of times I get resistance. And they're okay. They're okay with telling me, I'm not going to do this. And that's the first time they've been truthful about their blood sugars, about changing their diet, about testing, about walking barefoot or not walking barefoot. Before, somebody would say, this is what you need to do, and they wouldn't say anything. Now they're fighting back. Now they're turning around and saying, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not participating in this recommendation. And again, I just say, that's great. It's great to know. I love the honesty. I acknowledge that discharge. I really appreciate you, sharing with me your feelings. I feel like I have a better sense of what's going on, that dealing with your illness, your diabetes, is hard for you. You're frustrated. You're scared. And for those of you who are familiar with motivational interviewing, this would be called a complex reflection. And it's okay to have complex reflections in your session. Just acknowledging them creates that sense of empathy, which is very, very therapeutic, and you don't have to go any further. Create that sense of empathy and just ask, would you like to keep going, or do we want to just rest and pause and recollect and collect ourselves? One of the things that I have found to be the most helpful, though, is that the Center for Mindful Eating has a number of handouts, and you can see on your screen in tiny, tiny type all the handouts that we've created around these very emotionally charged conversations and issues, and how they can allow us to keep going back to our topic or our place of expertise, but also offer insight, closure, empathy, understanding, and those other things. So the handouts that I particularly like, you're going to notice Molly Kellogg has a number of them that I've identified, including choice, food triggers. Rana Kabatsnik has one about forgiveness. She also has starting a mindful eating practice. Donald Altman talks about pausing. Cheryl Wilkins, Power of Permission. Donald Altman, again, about slowing down. But these handouts are available. If you're a member, they are free, and you can go and download them. So it's just a great resource. I've done a lot of talking, so why don't we pause and get a chance to ask some more questions and try, if we can, to make this as interactive as possible.
Okay, I'm back.
So wonderful.
So I have a couple that were typed in, and why don't we start with those? So this is from Susan. She says, people give human qualities to food. His is a bad food. I hate good foods. I prefer bad food, so it makes me a bad person.
Right, and this, I think it's called personification of objects. That's very normal. And again, kind of if I got that question, I might say, I'd love to learn more about what you mean when you say that. So that's just asking that curiosity, just kind of getting away from the critical, good food, bad food. You could also say, you could do a kind of a more complex reflection. You feel wrong when you eat these foods, or you feel these foods are not helping you. And I know it seems weird to just make a statement like that, but again, your client, with that connection that your good counseling skills, they'll correct you. They'll say, no, that isn't what I mean. And you go, oh, great, tell me. And they'll correct you. Or they'll go, exactly, I am a terrible person because I ate that bad food. And that's, you're starting to kind of dig into the muck right here. And you could ask, is that true? Is that true that you're a terrible person because you ate that food? You could, kind of dig deeper and again, really kind of push forward to say, you don't want to eat those foods anymore. And they'll say, yeah, no, I do, though, because they taste so good. And you'll say, so the conflict is, how do I eat the foods that I love and keep those in my diet and not feel guilty? That's a complex reflection right there. So in this place, we're starting to see that when the judgment comes up, if we can, A, hear it in our own mind, oh, that's judgment. When that judgment comes up, we can say, is that judgment? Are they evaluating something, or are they shaming themselves? If you can separate that out and say, no, I think we're going towards shame, then we want to unpack the shame a little bit more, understand the driver, if you're comfortable doing that, or we want to acknowledge the shame and really have them feel heard that this is a painful topic. So navigating your own counseling skills, you're going to decide, how do I want to proceed with this personification of food? And again, there's not a right or wrong answer here. It's really based on your own counseling skills, on the rapport in the session. So just like everything, there's not a simple answer to that. Stephen?
Yes, I'm still here. So Josephine asks, people with diabetes are so used to being judged. How do you start your relationship with someone to show that there is no judgment now?
That is such a great question, and really I keep starting and reinforcing that I want to hear them fully, that my goal is to hear them completely, and I need their help to make sure that I understand what their issues are. So all the time I just repeat that spirit during my counseling session, is that I value your time. I want this to be a good use of your time. How can we make it a good use of your time? I'm really hearing these issues present. Am I correct? Am I hearing you fully? So I'm just always checking back with the client to make sure they have the experience of feeling heard. And I do that quite a bit, probably 3 to 5 times during a counseling session, just to do that little pause, that little check back, to ask questions, to make sure they're feeling heard. And then at the end, when we do our goals, we'll say, well, what came to the surface from this session? And again, most of the time the clients will say things like, it's different than what I thought it would be. I really got a lot of information, or I'm not as nervous, so it can go in a lot of different directions.
Okay. This next question is from Olga, and it goes back a ways, so you might have to kind of tease it out a little bit. She says, I can't understand that example, and I'm not sure which example she's referring to, but she says, because shame is a social emotion, I feel bad in front of others because of X reason, and guilt is a more personal emotion related to introspection. I did this thing, I feel horrible about it, I should not do it again. Sorry, that was not clear for me.
I'm not sure quite how to answer that. I would direct you to the work of Dr. Brene Brown. She has a great program on TEDS if you're interested. If you go to TEDS.com and type in shame, even if you Google shame, there's a 17-minute video that talks a lot about shame. She has books that she's written, and also the shame resilience training program called Connections, which offers more information to differentiate shame from guilt. It's a fascinating study, and I am by no means an expert, so my understanding is limited to the training that I've had, but I encourage everyone to explore it and really kind of figure out what the difference is for you as a professional. So with that, I would like to shift gears to this idea of meditation. And I want to guide you guys through a brief meditation. And this meditation is called A3D, and I'm going to guide you through what A3D means. And for those of you who would like a concrete example of doing this, as in printed, and how we guide clients through this, in the book that I co-authored with Michelle May called Eat What You Love, Love What You Eat with Diabetes, we actually have a body, mind, heart scan, and that's the phrasing that she uses that you can read as well. So the first part of this is just to sit comfortably, and you can have your eyes open or closed. And the A stands for awareness or attention. And really become conscious of your attention and bring your attention to the sound of your breathing or any sensory thing, but just kind of notice as it changes second by second. Continue noticing, just noticing whatever arises. The 3 stands for the 3-dimensionality of this, which is the body, the heart, and the mind. Bring your attention and awareness to your body, to your heart, and to your thoughts or mind. And again, no need to change or adjust or interpret in any way, just awareness. And the last one, the D, stands for drop in or deepen. And we're just going to let, and if we were to do this meditation for a longer period of time, maybe 20 or 30 minutes, you would be able to continue to deepen that awareness, just kind of letting it keep going a little bit deeper. And a lot of people start feeling like they generate some insight. Continue to be conscious and deepen this experience and awareness of our experience. Really kind of seeing what's underneath all of this. So what I'd like to do is actually just lead you through a meditation. We'll do this. It will not be particularly long because we're surprisingly close to the end of our webinar. So we'll probably do this for about maybe 2 or 3 minutes. So if everyone can sit comfortably, and I recommend a straight back, imagining kind of like a string from the top of my head down to my sits bone, just kind of pulling my spine straight up. And so for just a little bit, just become aware of your breath. We'll focus in on that. And bring your attention to the breathing as it comes in and comes out. And with this breath as it enters your body, notice your body. Bring your attention to maybe how you're sitting. Adjust your seat if you're uncomfortable. And with this next breath, just notice the emotions or mood in your heart. Let that awareness come to the surface of your mind. Exhaling. Inhaling. Again, no need to change or adjust or interpret in any way. Just noticing. Then we're going to notice any thoughts. Letting our breath come in and out. And bring your attention a little bit deeper. Continue to be aware of the body, the heart, and the mind. See if you get a sense of what might be underneath. Now we're going to slowly return back. Re-engaging our thoughts. Re-engaging our mind and our attention. So at this point, I'm going to call on Stephen again to see if there's any questions from doing that little meditation, which, by the way, was only 3 minutes long. We teach meditation in our diabetes program, and I find it very helpful, and we use it as a way of coping, kind of how to help people with the coping process.
Okay. So once again, if you would like to ask a question, please just either click the little hand button in your taskbar or type a question into the question box.
And I love talking with people. I think sometimes the dialogue is so much more fun than the type questions. I know they're good to type, but.
So we did have a little bit of follow-up from Olga, and she says that she is a specialist in emotional intelligence, and she's just wondering what sort of a definition you have for shame, and she thought maybe that her definition was a little bit different than yours.
Yeah, and Olga, I'm happy to talk with you outside of the webinar to try to understand a little bit more how I can assist or clarify. So I'm wondering if there's any questions about the meditation at all.
Okay, so I do have one comment from Gina, and she says that she really appreciated the meditation and wondered if it's available on a CD.
It is not. There are a number of meditations that are available on the Center for Mindful Eating's website, and those use the Creative Commons license, which means that they're free as long as they're not sold. There's really a tremendous number of resources available on the TCMU website that I would like to direct you towards. When using and looking at those resources, please go to Why Mindful Eating, and you will find a large number of those, as well as also in our archives. I'm going to move on, Stephen, just for sake of time, because we actually have a fair amount to go and not a lot of time left. So neuroplasticity is our next conversation that we're going to have, and there are 8 factors that I wanted to talk about that help the brain change. And the first one is aerobic exercise, and the second one is restful sleep. Third, nutrition, supportive relationship, novelty or new things, attention, time in, so that's that meditation, that piece, and then last, humor or laughter. So when we talk about neuroplasticity and we talk about changing the brain, we really want to kind of create a situation where we can do this. Now, for me, when I look at this list, I right away see nutrition. I'm a dietitian. I say, oh, good nutrition changes the brain. And supportive relationships. If I can help a client create a supportive relationship, them having a good relationship with food, them having a good relationship with themselves. Right now, I've got 2 of the 8 that are going to change the brain. If we toss in this idea of attention, meditation, I've got 4 of the 8. If we can laugh, I've got 5 of the 8. If I can get someone to take a walk, I've got 6 of the 8. If I can teach them something new, I've got 7 of the 8. And if they can get a good night's sleep, I've got all of them. So really when we talk about mindful eating, I really feel like mindful eating can really help change the brain. It's one of those kind of gateways I just feel like is hugely powerful. So that's always my excitement. And I like this list and this is, again, Dan Siegel's work. Clients, a lot of times, I actually have this typed up and I hand it as a handout. Clients are really, really surprised by this, and they say, oh, yeah, I get it. This is really what life balance is about. This is really important. What happens is there's a lot of things that happen that stop the brain from changing, and these are if there's a lot of emotional or cognitive stress, physical illness, a person's thinking can get overwhelmed, and this actually decreases neuroplasticity. So that shame, blame, guilt, it really can stop people from experiencing this neuroplasticity, and it's almost like they're getting attacked by sharks. So that's we don't want that. And ultimately, when we talk about this stress that we're dealing, creating a session where our sessions are calming and coping is great, but also really the big thing is that that's something the client can achieve on their own. And again, kind of going back to the work of Dr. Brene Brown, this is from her Connections training program. It really talks about listening and using your good counseling ear to understand this should business. And a lot of times clients will create a web and they talk about how I should be, who I should be, or what I should be. And this thinking, this web of judgment is really, it gets them tangled. They can't get out of their own way. And this web of judgment, again, just really brings the shame deeper it's definitely full of judgment, not non-judgment. And there's a little technique or a little exercise that I do with my clients, and what I have them do is just take that little web, and we cross off the word should, and we add the word could, how I could be, who I could be, or what I could be. And when they do that, I ask them, what was your experience with shame? Did that change your experience? And universally, everyone says yes. So helping clients shift that word choice from should to could is very, very powerful. So going back to those handouts that the Center for Mindful Eating created, Molly Kellogg talks about choosing your way through mindfulness, and she really talks about word choice. Veronica Batsnick also has in her work about forgiveness, talks about word choice. So it seems really insignificant, and yet there's a lot of very intelligent people that are saying it isn't. It's powerful. And moving away from those shoulds are really an amazing thing to help our clients work towards. And it's very empowering. For the sake of time, I'm going to skip questions for right now, and I do want to really help us kind of keep going a little bit and really think about how to shift this judgmental thinking. Hearing the good and bads in our clients' recalls offers us an opportunity to pause and to develop a more curious stance. And really what we're doing is we're not telling them to stop the behavior, because I can't tell you to do that. But what I can ask is, does it work? Just telling yourself how you should be, does it work? Is that effective? Are there other options? And really getting to this curious stance, I think, ultimately is non-judgment. It's mindfulness at its best. So does it work? And this is really this whole idea of mindfulness meditation. Does all of this stuff work? Is it effective? And so what we learned is that in the research from eating behaviors, and this is a 2015 study that looked at 14, so it's a meta-analysis of 14 different research studies, and the results suggest that mindfulness meditation was effective at decreasing binge eating and emotional eating in people that engaged in these behaviors. So it does not by itself, we do not have definitive answers that this causes weight loss. It does cause decreased binge eating, and it does cause decreased emotional eating. So that's the population that works for. Now, as a diabetes educator, I see binge eating all the time. I see emotional eating all the time. So for my population, I feel like this is a huge tool to bring this non-judgmental, mindful awareness around food and eating is a huge tool. And I thought what was so interesting about it is training the mind to be present without judgment when eating may be an effective way to stop emotional and binge eating. So you're not teaching them to choose something lower calorie. You're not teaching them to choose something lower carbohydrate. You're not teaching them a skill, based in like a data point. We're teaching people to be present with their direct experience, non-judgmentally, and that appears to decrease emotional and binge eating. And to me, that is just kind of fascinating. So I want to go to a poll because I think the polls are really helpful. So my work, my counseling environment does not support helping clients address emotional or binge eating. And so in this poll right over here, does your environment, and it says over here it's a negative. No, it does not. So read it as 1, there's no support. I can't go into these kinds of topics. 2, read it as there's a little bit of support, but it really comes from me. 3, there's some shared support. And when I'm thinking about support, I'm thinking about administration, I'm thinking about your work environment. Are your providers, are the people that you work with, are they supportive of you doing this? Are they giving you resources? Are they giving you access to resources? So if people can take a little bit of time to do that, that'd be great. I'll let you guys know I work in a diabetes center and now embedded in a primary care practice. Next door to me I have a social worker, and across the hall I have a therapist. So I'm in the social, emotional support. I'm almost in the behavioral side of the equation. They've moved me closer and closer towards this grouping of social worker and therapist and diabetes educator. We're kind of in this little group, recognizing, I think my administration is recognizing a lot of the times why people are struggling with food and eating, with their diabetes care. It's more complex than they don't want to do it. There's a lot of these barriers. So our poll has right now about 73%, and 31% of you identify there's a little support, but most of it comes from me. 20% said it was a shared support, and about 48% said that there was support and resources available, but no one really identified a lot of support. So this was really something I think is pretty interesting. So when you leave this webinar, you might want to turn around and identify, how can we build the supports in place? Because I think this non-judgmental stance is very powerful. Again, I think all of you recognize that if you're the only one who's not judging, maybe that's not enough. Maybe we need to kind of bring other people on board. And you can use the research as well, so there's quite a bit of research. So one of the things that we do know is that mindfulness training may help you experience firsthand how subtle judgment can stop the change process. And just having you, before you introduce this to a client, just start kind of saying, well, I'm going to play with this mindfulness business and see if it helps me with my own experience. Use yourself as a guinea pig. The Center for Mindful Eating does have a position statement on mindfulness meditation, on meditation and mindfulness meditation in particular, and really recognizes that meditation can assist in creating an effective mindful eating practice. And so we do really recommend that mindful eating and meditation go hand in hand. So for those of you who are interested in mindful eating, really you may want to also kind of explore a little bit more about meditation. I wanted to go right to reviewing our learning objectives and make sure that we've done all of those. So we did, I believe, state 2 examples of when judgment is appropriate and when they work, and we identified that it's that data. So when it's subjective information, it's inappropriate. When it's objective information, judgment is much more appropriate. And I think we did a pretty good job of explaining how shame and judgment kind of go. We talked about 3 reasons why shame inhibits change for sure, and some benefits of mindfulness. And hopefully all of you guys got pretty excited about those 8 factors that support neuroplasticity in the brain. I think we went through everything. We're a tiny bit long on this program, but it was pretty action-packed. And I hope all of you really get a chance to explore the Center for Mindful Eating, learning, and kind of really diving in a little bit deeper to the wonderful resources we have. I am going to stay on the call and just let everyone, if there's any additional questions that people have, I know some of you can't stay, but if there's additional questions that you have, you're welcome to ask them at this time.